Hi everybody, I am here again. Apologies if you can hear some beeping in the background. Rue's just trying to turn the aircon off, or the heater off. It's having a few slight issues, technical issues in the background here today. It seems that the air conditioner is taking on a life of its own, and much as we try and turn it off, it ain't. It's
live forever.
Stuck on. What's going on?
Oh no. This
Don't
is
understand.
We're going to be cooked. It's like spewing heat.
It's very cold here. So this is on heat mode and Rue's sitting right underneath it. It's actually not as bad as it sounds because it is very cold, but it's a little bit concerning that we seem to have lost control of it. Because not only is it going to be a little bit noisy when I'm trying to tell the old stories, it's also going to cost us about $1,000 in power bills over the next month.
What if it stays on all week?
It stays on forever. Anyway, that's happening in the background. So not a huge amount of news from me today. It's been a relatively quiet week that we've had here. I've started doing writing sprints though, and I first discovered doing writing sprints in Slovenia randomly, and because there was sod all else to do in Slovenia when we were there anyway. We went there to snowboard, there was no snow. So I was doing a bit of writing and I discovered this concept of doing sprints, but I was struggling to actually make myself do sprints. It's basically where you set a timer, write as much as you can, as fast as you can, and worry about editing and correcting typos and spelling mistakes and things later on. And it's just, the idea is just to get words down, and then you can, because it's always easier to edit words that you have rather than to write new ones. So once you get a beautiful long first draft, 100,000 words plus, you can then chop it and change it as much as your heart's content for ages, and you know that the book will always exist because it's there, it's done, it's written. So that's the theory anyway. So what I've been doing is sprinting with the group. So we actually go on Facebook Messenger at a certain time of the night. Well, here for me it's midnight till about 3 o'clock in the morning, so it works perfectly into my schedule. I think it's a realistic time in America where most of the rest of them are based. But we're doing really good. So they set the timer and tell me when to go, and then at the end of the time period we all jump in there and type how many words we've done in that time period, and then we chat, and then we go again. We keep doing that for about 3 hours, and I'm getting pretty good words. I was trying to do 3,000 words a day, and have been trying to do 3,000 words a day for a long time, not always succeeding, but I'm managing to get 3,000 words done pretty much in that sprinting period of about 3 hours. So I've upped my word count to about 5,000 words a day for now. So we'll see if that actually pans out and I manage to keep that up. But I'm pretty happy about that anyway.
It's awesome.
And the other success this week for us is Rue has sold a bunch of her handbags.
Yay.
So her business, Happy Cake Noise, is just starting to take off after months and months of making stuff and figuring out what glues to use to glue toys onto handbags. That is why she was decapitating Barbies, if you remember that from me mentioning it a while back. So she is gluing all sorts of toys and bits and pieces to handbags that she rescues from charity shops, and she's just
rescues like puppies.
Just started to sell the first few, so she's very excited with her business taking off. Anyway, I'll jump right into it. There's some good news and some bad news, and I don't know which is which really. But basically, I'm not reading about New Zealand today. I am reading Kamikaze Kangaroos, but I'm going to do another reading from Kamikaze Kangaroos next week. Just because I was reading this one bit about Mum, bless her, and it was just so damn funny. It was just I was killing myself laughing reading it, and I was like, I've got to read that. Don't know if it's one of those. It was funny because it's me and it's my mum, and I'm mercilessly taking the piss out of her as I do. But it was I find it hilarious. So I'm going to read that little bit and keep on going because it was some really interesting, really nice bits I found. And then next week I will do the bit about us in New Zealand and probably just finish the very end of the book, and then after that we can go into the wedding book because that's rubbish and no one wants to hear that anyway. So might as well maximise the good one, and then when we get to that, I'll drop to only having one person watching, and I'll just make it up as we go along. Anyway, I will now read about the visit that my dear old mum paid us in Sydney. So Gillian and Krista, Rue, and I had driven across the Nullarbor in our knackered van Rusty, which had boiled up multiple times en route and was basically just knackered. Unfortunately, we were planning on travelling all around that part of Australia, the eastern side, with Mum in Rusty, which was looking to be a little bit of a non-starter by this point. Anyway, I will say in advance, sorry Mum, because you're watching, but she hasn't been featured very much in these videos, which is surprising to me. So this one's just for her. It makes me chuckle just thinking about it. Oh dear. Oh dear.
Oh dear, you mean.
Even I titled these chapters Mum Incoming, Mum Outbound and Mum Addendum. So yes. Okay, here we go. Mum Incoming. Because we'd had so much trouble with Rusty, we were a bit late picking Mum up from the airport in Sydney. 3 days late, to be precise. Luckily, being a mum, she was both highly resourceful and prepared for disappointment. Having promised to be there to meet her, I was kind of expecting to look after her, but I should have known that within minutes of us being back together, she'd be looking after me again. By the time we arrived, she'd not only booked herself into a hostel and spent several days exploring Sydney, she'd also booked us into the same hostel, and now she was bored with sightseeing, raring to go and counting on us to provide the excitement. Personally, I was hoping it just wouldn't get too awkward. I mean, as travelling with my new girlfriend and my sister was one thing. Travelling with my new girlfriend and my sister and my mum was something else. But she was delighted to see Rue again, and overjoyed that we'd become an item. "You'll have such beautiful children," she exclaimed. So maybe a little awkward then. The first thing we tackled was the Sydney Harbour Bridge, climbing it because, well, it's an iconic Australian structure, of course, and because you can. The guide made us put on suits that looked suspiciously like prison overalls, and Mum emerged from the dressing room trailing a foot of spare material from both sleeves and both legs. "It's made for a giant," she moaned. What size do you normally take?" the guide asked her. "In these? I haven't got a clue. It's not something I wear very often." "She takes size gnome," I chipped in. "Well, we can't have anything flapping," said the guide. "It could distract the drivers on the road below. Don't worry, we've got overalls to fit every size." A short while later, he was forced to concede defeat. "We've got every size except yours," he admitted. "So we're gonna do the roll-up thing." All four of us took a limb and rolled up Mum's suit like we were changing her tyres in the Grand Prix. Then we spent some time clipping on our hats, sunglasses and special issue face cloths to ourselves with lanyards and practising with the Navy SEALs radio, a high-tech headset which transmitted the guide's comments as vibrations through our jawbones, allowing our inner ear to hear them in spite of the traffic noise and the deafening wind. "Good to go," the pit crew boss said, and we followed him out onto the bridge. At first we walked through the middle of the bridge's structure, suspended above the thundering traffic below on a narrow walkway of steel mesh. Looking down whilst walking made the mesh seem transparent, which was an eerie feeling. A series of ladders led us up onto the bridge's main steel frame, and we followed the curve of it all the way to the top. The view, 360 degrees over the city and the harbour, was incredible, very nearly worth the $200 we'd each paid for the privilege. Rue and I paused there for a lingering kiss, much to the disgust of 3 turban-wrapped men at the back of our group. "You don't have to do that every time you stop, you know," Mum said. "It's very nice up here, but I'd like to get down sometime today." We spent about 2 hours on the bridge. "I'd love to have your job," I said to the guide afterwards. "How did you get it?" "Oh, I just walked in and asked for it. They do all the training here. It's not as fun as it looks though, you have to be very fit. That walk we just did is nearly half a mile. Sometimes you have to do it 4 times a day." "Wow, you guys have it tough," I said, straining to keep the sarcasm from my voice. "Hell yeah." Next on our list was a beach trip. Assuming we'd find Bondi horrendously crowded, we decided to visit one of Sydney's lesser-known beaches. A trip to Manly Beach involved crossing the harbour by ferry, which we wanted to do anyway. So we spent the morning watching jugglers, human statues and didgeridoo players in the Bay Area, and then headed over to the dock with our bathers and towels. I struck a suitably macho pose under the sign for Manly Departures, and then we were on the ferry, transfixed by the gleaming Sydney Opera House sliding past to starboard. It looked magnificent, in the what the hell do they do with those pointy bits on top kind of way. I never got the chance to go in, but I have it on good faith that the ceilings are vaulted to match the exterior shape, rising inside to majestic peaks much as they do on the outside. Now, I've been in a lot of Australian buildings, and I couldn't help but notice, but wonder how they clean the cobwebs out up there. Once I left Rusty's door open to get the hot air out, and I caught an ambitious spider spinning a web right across the opening of the door. So you can bet those pointy, spiry type things are chock full of the buggers. And you can bet they were bigger than the ones in Rue's games room. Maybe they keep lizards, I thought. When the ferry docked, we sauntered off in a cheerful mix of locals and tourists. They all rushed off in the same direction, clearly ignoring the beach, leaving us staring down at it alone. It wasn't quite what I'd expected. About 50 metres wide, the strip of sand was littered with rocks and gravel and sloped down to the same stretch of water that the ferry plied. It wasn't a particularly enticing swimming experience, but we made the most of it, stretching out our towels and watching a bunch of local lads trying to turn backflips off the beach wall. Another ferry docked an hour later, sending swarms of people skittering past our empty strip of sand, all clearly too busy to catch a few rays. I know this isn't the best beach in the country, but I'm surprised we've got it all to ourselves, Mum said. It's filthy, Rue pointed out. I don't really want to stay here. That swim left a layer of diesel all over my body. I can feel it all slimy-like. Sorry, love, I said. Jill, do you want to call it a day and go find some ice cream? Hell yeah, I do. This beach stinks of sewage. So we packed up, said goodbye and good riddance to Manly Beach. What a shithole, I said as we walked away. Even Blackpool Beach is better than that. I don't know, Jill said. Last time I was on Blackpool Beach, I found 3 used condoms and a syringe. And it pissed it down with rain the entire time. This beach is pretty shitty, but it's still in Australia. True. With no real plan, we drifted with the latest crowd of arrivals, past a row of shops and cafes. Mum bought us all ridiculously large ice creams because it was Wednesday, and we sort of went with the flow while we ate them. And that was when we found the real Manly Beach, a kilometre-long ribbon of the whitest sand, bordered by blue-green ocean, so inviting my feet were in it before I knew what I was doing. Oh, bollocks, Jill said. No wonder we were getting funny looks from the people when we got off the ferry. No bugger told us though, did they? Would you go up to a bunch of half-naked people our age and start telling them where to go? Probably not. We slurped our ice creams in quiet awe, scanning the hundreds of bodies sprawled across the sand, not even close to filling it. Dozens of jet skis zipped past, churning the ocean either side of it. Swimming allowed flags were present. Swimmers swam between them and surfers surfed, and it looked exactly like the Australian beach scene I'd been anticipating. Should we go for a dip? Mum asked the others. Nah, I'm kind of dry now, Jill said. I don't want to get undressed again, said Rue. I stink of oil and I'm scared that if anyone smokes near me I'll burst into flames. Oh, all right then. Shall we head back to the ferry? That was Mum's first beach day in Australia. And because we were having so much fun doing other things, it also turned out to be her last. Probably didn't give her the best impression. Mum really fancied seeing some of Australia's unique animals, so the next day Jill agreed to take her to Sydney Zoo. Both Rue and I felt we'd had enough close encounters with the local wildlife and decided to forgo the entrance fee in favour of a rare bit of time together. No, it's not what you think, unfortunately. First, we did our chores and bought a nifty new phone with a Skype button as part of a decision I'd made to keep in closer touch with my family back in England. Then we went in search of a hairdresser. Rue had been toying with the idea of going blonde, and she suddenly thought a change of hair colour would be a great way to surprise Mum and Jill when they got back. I had to admit, it's a tactic that would never have occurred to me. Sydney has everything, usually many times over, so it took no trouble at all to find a hair salon with an appointment free. It only took 2 hours to transform Rue's mousy brown locks into a platinum blonde bombshell. That's fantastic, I said, blown away by the transformation. I've got plenty of bleach left if you want it, the hairdresser offered. I mixed up way too much. I'm a try anything once kind of guy, so I thought why not? And told her to go for it. My hair is obviously made of something quite different to Rue's, so after a similar length of time wrapped in cling film, it turned into a shocking bright orange. I looked like one of the Rugrats. Oh dear, that's not supposed to happen, the hairdresser said, which wasn't the most comforting thing I've ever heard in a hairdressing salon. Don't worry, let me try this. 2 hours later, I emerged with hair the colour of dirty straw. Well, that rules out horse riding as an activity, I told Rue. If I get within striking distance of a horse, I'll get eaten. We could get some red dye from the supermarket, she suggested. No thanks. Really? What about purple? I was already used to Rue's new hair by the time Mum and Jill got back, so I wasn't prepared for all the gasping and shrieks of delight. Look at you, Mum explained. You're amazing. So blonde, so beautiful. Wow. Then she turned to me. And look at you, you're... what exactly are you? A bloody idiot, I supplied. She seemed to consider this for a moment. Yes, she said. That looks about right then. Mum outbound. Next, we took Mum on a wine tasting tour to the Hunter Valley, where 3 things happened. We all tasted a wide variety of Australian wines, Rusty broke down, and Mum got thoroughly drunk for only the second time in her life. The first time had been on a pirate ship, on an all-you-can-drink excursion we'd booked as part of our Caribbean cruise. She'd gone into it with the best of intentions, wanting only to keep Jill and I safe from the evils of drink diving. We persuaded her to have a cup of bright red cocktail the crew were doling out from huge vats. She'd quite enjoyed it, pointing out that she couldn't even taste any alcohol. But of course, we told her, that's because it really isn't any alcohol. And being ridiculously naive and already slightly intoxicated, she spent the rest of the afternoon drinking the stuff. We carried her back to our cabin on the cruise liner. She lay on the floor for the next 2 hours, frantically holding on because she said she was spinning so much she was going to fall off. She made one long-distance telephone call to Dad, apologising incoherently for waking him up at 4 a.m, then threw up in the sink and passed out on the carpet. It was like watching her experience a condensed version of my entire time at university. This time, however, she promised us faithfully that she would not get drunk. Not in the slightest. She merely became very happy, and then very giggly, and then spent the rest of the evening very loudly denying that she was drunk to everyone that walked past our tent. Poor Mum was losing quite a bit of her holiday time to car problems, though. With Rusty boiling up almost everywhere we drove, it brought an unnecessary element of stress into every journey we made. When it happened again, only days after we'd paid a garage in Sydney to fix hoses and check the radiator, we knew straight away who to call. We'd seen a cartoon spanner on a van driving around town, and Jill and I had erupted with laughter so suddenly she nearly swerved Rusty off the road. Lube-mobile, it said on the side in huge red letters. What does he do? Deliver sex toys? Jill said when she'd regained control of herself. I don't get it, said Rue. Mum was similarly nonplussed. Lube-mobile, I repeated by way of explanation. Yeah, they have those everywhere. They're mobile mechanics. They have adverts on TV and everything. So this time we decided to leave Rusty behind in our hostel and call the grease monkey. There's not a lot of room in that car park, Mum pointed out. I hope his van will fit. Mum, it's the Lube-mobile. Trust me, it can slide in anywhere. Actually, he reversed in when he arrived, which seemed appropriate. The mechanic was friendly, professional, and gave us a tip that he reckoned would stop Rusty having so many radiator problems in future. Call a decent mechanic, he said. The last one didn't even tighten the screws. Bet the Lube-mobile has no problem with tightness, I muttered, noticing Jill was having a similar trouble keeping straight face. He was a nice bloke, Mum commented as the lube man repacked his tools. Yeah, not as slipper as I expected. The joke was still lost on her, but Jill was delighted when she walked around the front of the van to admire the graphic of a fist clutching a rather phallic spanner. Tony, you've got to see this, she called. I went to investigate, walking past the dubiously worded advert on the side, dial 13 30 32 for lube. And on the front was the coup de grace. The mechanic that comes to you, it said across the bonnet. The mechanic that comes all over you, Jill paraphrased. Could be worse, I said. The mechanic that just pops in. Once Rusty's radiator was fixed, again, we decided to risk driving him north to explore Sydney's Blue Mountains. We found a company that ran a caving experience and booked ourselves in and crawled Rusty at 20 miles an hour around the narrowest ledge of a mountain road. Every meeting with an oncoming vehicle was life or death, and it took a good 2 hours to make the journey. Once there, we encountered another amusing wardrobe issue. Caving is another activity performed in overalls, though these were heavy, mud-stained canvas boiler suits rather than high-tech prison wear we'd sported for the bridge climb. Mum found a suit to fit, rolled up the legs and sleeves again, and donned a pair of rubber wellies. It was only then that we calculated the following equation. Gnome plus overalls equals Oompa Loompa. It took a great strength of will to avoid humming songs from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as we headed down into the depths. We've all done a bit of caving before in various parts of the world, but there's still something so exciting to me about being underground. The strange stillness to the air, the cool, even temperature, and the omnipresent dripping moisture, and the calmness, the sense of millions of years of patient geological history surrounding and engulfing me in complete darkness. I find it oddly comforting. We did a series of abseils and clambered over boulders and around tunnels of varying sizes. Then came time to put ourselves through a squeeze. This is caving terminology for a tight gap or narrow crevice that you generally have to do a fair bit of contortion to get through. This one was nearly vertical, meaning you went head and hands first into an opening in the ground, emerging in a chamber below from which you could quickly climb back around to the main area. Mum chose to take watch as we took turns going through the squeeze before finally summoning up the courage to give it a go herself. When she felt ready, she knelt on the sandy floor of the cave, put her arms above her head, bent forwards and slithered into the hole. And stuck there. Something we hadn't really considered is that Mum, though short, is somewhat egg-shaped, meaning she's tiny at the head with a childlike face and substantially wider at the bottom end. And it was the bottom end that was stuck, suspended through the hole with her arms and legs sticking out of the ceiling in the chamber below. "Quick! Push!" I shouted. "No!" yelled Mum. "I'll fall!" "Right, grab a leg each and pull." "No! I'll smack my head on the rocks." "Well, okay, then we'll just leave you there. We can send some down every few days with more food and a new book." "Don't make me laugh," she pleaded, which, as we all know, is secretly a plea to be tickled. "I'm sorry, did you say you wanted tickling?" I asked, just to be sure. "You tickle me, you die," she said, but she was already chuckling while she said it, so I didn't take the threat too seriously. "Hey, if I put my foot on your arse and lean heavily enough on it, maybe you'll pop out like a cork." Mum was in full hysterics by this time, her stumpy, protruding legs quivering in time with her laughter. "Help me," she chortled. "Can you wriggle a bit?" "No, I'm wedged in tight." I checked it out. "That is amazing. Your ass has completely conformed to the shape of the hole. I couldn't even slide a credit card into the gap." "No way," Jill exclaimed. "That happened to me in America. So it is genetic." Eh? Eh? What happened in America? "Oh, we were climbing this little waterfall and I tried to hoist myself up backwards. When I planted my bum in the gully, it dammed the waterfall and a mini lake started building up behind me. The tour guide said, 'Well, lady, that is one malleable ass.' I never forgot it." "No, I'm not surprised." Then Mum spoke up. "I know it's fun to reminisce, but could we possibly leave it to a time when I'm not stuck upside down, hanging by my arse half a mile underground?" "Oh yeah, sorry Mum. Shall we push?" "No!" We pushed anyway. Ruth scooted down into the lower chamber to take her arms and proceeded to catch her when Jill and I finally put enough pressure on her buttocks to squeeze them through. She was still giggling when Ruth helped her back up, prompting a round of applause from our guide and the rest of our tour group. After that, we wisely decided to head back to the surface. Mum's holiday was over far too quickly, and her departure brought us to the brink of another series of changes. Rue had decided that as only a year had passed since losing her own mum, she owed it to her family to spend the holiday with them. She'd booked a flight back to Perth and would be leaving at the start of December, only a few days after our mum flew home. This left a Rue-shaped hole in Jill's and my plans, and all the hostels around Sydney were already fully booked over Christmas. We scoured our favourite website, a collection of backpackers' classified ads called the Gumtree, looking for somewhere to rent. And this time, we struck it lucky. A science student called Leo was taking a trip to Europe over the holidays, and he was looking for someone to pay his rent on his flat while he was away. We jumped at the opportunity, sending him a whopping great pile of cash, $600 as the deposit, so desperate were we to secure some accommodation. "I hope you did the right thing trusting that guy," Rue said. Until she mentioned it, I hadn't even thought about it. And yet again, Jill and I found ourselves alone together in an unfamiliar city, living in a hostel with Christmas just around the corner. It was starting to become a habit. Okay, Mum addendum. The day after Mum arrived home, we got an email from her. It seems things hadn't been quite as dull as expected in England while she was away. One night, Dad had received a phone call from the Welsh police, demanding that he come into the Cardiff City police station. When he protested that it was 2 a.m, they'd replied that either he could come straight away, or they'd come and get him, with handcuffs. My dad is the most mild-mannered individual you could ever wish to meet. He calmly ushered the dog into the car and drove for 2 hours through the night to Cardiff. There, the local constables confronted him. They wanted to know what kind of business he was into, what kind of game he was playing. He didn't have a clue what they were on about, and said as much. So they took him up the valley in a paddy wagon, stopping at one of the houses we'd bought and renovated a couple of years back. They led him inside, and his jaw hit the floor. The entire house had been converted into a cannabis factory. Bless him. My dad's about as clueless as a person can be when it comes to the evils of this world. I mean, he doesn't even drink. The cops escorting him took one look at his face and set him free. If your reaction had been anything else, you'd be sleeping in a cell tonight, one told him. Apparently, they'd seen his genuine shock and realised he had nothing to do with it. Dad then spent a while wandering through the house, staring in disbelief at the damage done. Holes had been cut in the floors and ceilings to run vents through. Thousands of pounds worth of lights had been hung from every surface, beaming down infrared radiation onto both floors, all of which were covered in a foot of topsoil. Hundreds and hundreds of plants were being bagged up by a forensic team, while a police electrician tackled the deadly mess our tenants had left by the front door. All the grow lights had been wired directly into the mains, bypassing the electricity meter. Bundle upon bundle of cables snaked off up the stairs, branching into every room. Even though they'd been off for hours, the house at 4 a.m. was hotter than a summer's day in the garden. That's how we spotted them too, a young copper informed him. They were using the attic. A helicopter passing overhead with a heat sensor saw your roof lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh, said my dad. It happens all the time. In most cases, the landlord is in on it, turning a blind eye in exchange for a cut of the profits. But I could tell you weren't involved. I guess because you live so far away, they thought they could get away with it. But they were the best tenants we ever had, Dad told the cop. They paid the rent by direct debit, always there on the first of the month, and never a peep out of them. I'm not surprised. I didn't want you coming down and seeing all this. But why? My dad asked. What do you mean? Said the cop. Why? Why have they done all this? To grow drugs, of course. Drugs? Cannabis? Oh. You do know what cannabis is, don't you, sir? I think so. Actually, no. The cop sighed. He pointed across the room. That, Mr. Slater, is cannabis. Oh, right. So you understand now the seriousness of this situation? Yes, officer, I do. It's funny, though. Only the other day, I was wishing all our other tenants were just like these ones. Other tenants, you say? How many houses do you rent out round here? 6 at the moment. Right then, we'll go and have a look, shall we? It was a very, very long night for him. Mum, when she got back, had been unable to resist calling us with a blow-by-blow account. It could only happen to your dad, she concluded. I'm away for a few weeks and he nearly gets arrested for running a drug lab. I bet he'd make a bigger profit than he does on the rent, I said. The cops did tell him the stuff they found in the house was worth about £250,000. So your dad asked if you got to keep some of it in lieu of damage. I don't think that went well, too well with the police. Oh my God, no way. Yes, and that's not the best bit. Tell Tony what you said to the cops. And my dad poked his head into the Skype window and said a cheery hello. Tell him what you said, Mum demanded. Dad complied. Oh, well, the police seemed to think it was a good job I hadn't gone round the house to do any rent inspections or anything like that. They probably weren't very nice people living in there, you see, and they might have been annoyed if I'd called in and seen the mess they'd made. Yeah, no shit. You could have had guns and stuff. Yes, well, this is South Wales. I doubt they'd have had guns. They barely have motor cars. But we'd had a couple of complaints from some of the neighbours about the state of the garden. Apparently, these guys weren't bothering to look after it, and it had gone a bit wild. So in a couple of weeks, I was planning on taking over our lawnmower round and asking them if I could cut their grass.
Oh, no. Good thing you didn't.
Let me know, Rue, when we're running. Okay, couple more.
Go for it.
Student digs. Saying goodbye to Rue was even harder this time than it had been before. I knew she'd be back, and I completely understood that she had to go and spend Christmas with her family. It was the right thing to do, and she missed them every bit as much as Jill and I missed ours. But still, it made me incredibly sad to think of spending the next month without her. In the entire time we'd been going out, we'd hardly spent a moment apart. Some people might call it unhealthy, and a year ago I'd have been one of them. But you know, there was just something about Rue that made her hard to let go of. There's a word for that, but I think it gets overused a lot in books like this. So for now, we'll just go with Jill's phrase to describe it. It's a pathetically needy, limpet-like inability to prise yourself off one another for more than 10 goddamn seconds. It's possible she was a little bit jealous. Nevertheless, our first job was to find our new digs and pay for them, before the bloke that offered them to us changed his mind. Leo and his girlfriend were both postgrad students in genetics and art, respectively. We'd been as lucky as hell to snag their place, and I promised Leo faithfully that we'd look after it. Now we had to meet up with him, learn how to feed his fish, and part with a sum of money so staggering that I was sleeping with it inside my underpants in case our hostel burned down in the middle of the night. Leo seemed like a good bloke in our brief phone conversations, and he was clearly a clever chap, so I had high hopes that his flat would be clean and tidy. I know the two things don't always go together, especially considering he was a student, but I've been reading and rereading The Secret for weeks now, and I'm determined to put that whole law of attraction thing into practice. For anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a souped-up version of the power of positive thinking. Basically, if you believe strong enough, anything you want will come to you. I was believing as hard as I could that Leo's flat would be worth the money. And you know what? It was. In fact, Leo's apartment was amazing. Incredible. There are buckets of these words, called superlatives apparently, that I could use to describe it, but actually, that's just what it was. Superlative. I'd seen a grainy photo of his bedroom on the advert, but my first real hint of what lay in store was when we found what we thought was Leo's building. Our entire knowledge of the area extended to a name, Surrey Hills, and the fact that our hostel manager thought it was a very nice neighbourhood. So when my astounding map-reading abilities led us to a sleek new apartment building with a video intercom by the doors, we thought we'd hit the jackpot. A remote-controlled conversation with a confused Indian gentleman followed, the outcome of which was this was not the right address. We were instructed to go around the corner and down the street for a block where we would find the expensive-looking building. This made me quite excited, and a little nervous. It also made Jill question my map-reading skills again, but our second attempt was much more successful. And the building we were looking for, it did look rather nice. The foyer was clad entirely in marble. Leo buzzed us in, but had to come down to meet us because the lift was activated by a wireless plastic doofer thing on his keyring. The lobby doors were too, if no one was in above to buzz you in. Cool. We rode the lift all the way to the top, and I joked that we'd arrived at the penthouse. Yeah, he said. My parents own the building, so... And he opened the door to the kind of room you see on the cover of Grand Designs magazine. It was wide, open plan, mostly white, and scattered with artfully staged props. The pictures on the wall had their own freaking lights, for God's sake. That's how posh this place was. The cushions all matched, and there were so many of them on the sofa there was hardly any room for my bum. A telescope big enough to fit a small dog inside poised elegantly in one corner, but it contained no dog. A gleaming black granite kitchen dominated one end of the room, while at the other end sliding glass doors gave out onto a wide balcony overlooking Sydney Harbour skyline. Holy shit. So, let me show you the room, Leo said. I had to pick Jill up off the floor first. Get my jaw while you were down there, I told her. Leo's bedroom was the master suite of the penthouse apartment. There was another bedroom which he rented out to a friend who was conveniently out of town. Otherwise, he'd probably be on house-sitting duties and Jill and I would be sleeping on the street over Christmas. One wall of the bedroom was lined with matching his and hers study desks festooned with computery gubbins. The opposite wall was lined with mirrors which concealed the walk-in wardrobes. Again, his and hers, by which I mean one was noticeably bigger and filled with shoes. There was an ensuite bathroom in grey marble with a double-headed shower big enough to practice yoga in, and the pièce de résistance, the wall opposite the bed. It was all glass, and Leo led us through it out onto a patio area that covered the entire floor plan of the apartment below. It was stunning, sweeping 270-degree views. I calculated that. Took in the whole of Surrey Hills behind us and everything up to and including the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. My first thought was, party! My second was, no, bad Tony. Then I noticed the outdoor speakers mounted above the glass doors and a shiny steel barbecue tucked away at one side. Party it is. Well, it would be if I had any friends. I tuned back into the conversation. Leo was telling us that it was the perfect spot to watch the New Year's Eve firework display. But apart from that, we never really come out here. It's too windy to play badminton. Big enough though, I asked. Oh yes. You should try tennis, only you don't want to get your balls out up here. Sorry? Your balls. You don't want them out up here. I'm sorry, what? Well, you'd have to go down in the lift to fetch them, unless you put a big net up around the whole place. Oh, all right, I get you. Jill was giving me that look that says, please stop talking. She uses that look a lot, but it works sometimes. Notably absent from the flat was a TV, but Leo seemed like the type who might be above such mundane concerns. I've often wished I could be classy enough to tell people I don't watch television, thereby subtly suggesting that my time is too valuable and too important to be frittered away so frivolously. But I'm not cut from that quality of cloth. Blame my generation if you like, I love telly. I decided not to mention this lack though, because I already felt dramatically out of place. That was one step from asking him, dude, can my band crash on the couch? But I needn't have worried. Leo led us in from the bright sunshine of the balcony and closed both doors and the curtains behind us. Then he plucked a remote from the wall above the bed, clicked a switch, and a giant projector screen lowered itself from the ceiling. "This is how you operate the projector," he said, in a matter-of-fact way that suggested everybody had one. I was expecting James Bond to burst in at any moment and start shooting henchmen. "Sound is wired through the walls, so keep the bass down or things start to fall off them." Jill and I mumbled our agreement to keep the bass down. Leo pushed a few more buttons and the screen rolled itself up again, vanishing into a hidden cavity in the roof. He waved the remote at us, then returned it to its wall socket. "Right, you got all that?" We nodded. "Great, let's go and see the pool." Ever hear that phrase, "how the other half live"? Well, now I knew. This was how they live, and for the next month, it was how I would be living. The basement of Leo's building contained a 15-metre heated swimming pool, a separate jacuzzi hot tub, and a fairly decent gym, and a sauna. Our plastic dongle gave us access to the lot, and it was available 24/7. The rest of the basement was an underground car park, which sadly we couldn't use for Rusty, as Leo was leaving his own car there. Then again, the place was full of BMWs and gleaming 4x4s. Rusty wouldn't last a day down here before someone called the cops and had him towed. Poor Rusty. Somehow we kept him going, but I had a feeling his end was near, and it wouldn't be pretty. Back upstairs, we thanked Leo for his hospitality and tried not to act overawed by the place. We'd have it all to ourselves until January the 2nd, when Leo and his girlfriend will be returning from Europe. I did a quick calculation in my head as we handed over the money. We were paying Leo half the rent, at $300 a week. So together with his flatmate, they must have been paying $600. And this was only because his parents let him rent the place at cost price. Ouch. My hand shook as I let go of the wad of banknotes, and not without good reason. Leo was being incredibly generous, letting us stay here for the same price he'd been paying, especially over the holiday season when accommodation prices in the city went absolutely nuts. But none of this changed the fact that we couldn't afford it. That $600 I'd given him, on top of the deposit I'd sent him earlier, had cleaned us both out. Jill and I were practically penniless, which meant we had 2 weeks to come up with another $600 to pay the other half of the rent, or we'd still be sleeping on the street over Christmas. As I explained to Jill while we packed our stuff in the hostel, we didn't have to worry about a thing. It would all work out. We just have to believe, I reminded her. No pressure. One more. A Christmas miracle. You'd think that with such a potent incentive hanging over our heads, the very first thing we would do would be to pound the pavement looking for jobs. That certainly would have been the most sensible move. But neither Jill and I have ever been accused of being sensible. So instead, we signed up for a month-long full-time Kung Fu course. The thought process behind this decision went something like this. La 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 la. Looking back, I'd say we were in deep denial, and I don't mean the river in Egypt. Kung Fu was something we'd both studied at different times, but never had the chance to practice together. One of the few downsides of travelling is the difficulty of keeping up any sort of regular training, and by this point all forms of physical exercise had long since fallen by the wayside. Now, with free access to our own private gym and swimming pool, we finally both had the time and the opportunity to get in shape, so we took it. I won't say it was the cleverest decision I've ever made, but I've always felt that something was guiding me, some shadowy hand of fate that moves me from place to place and beckons me into the actions I choose. Of course, it could just be that I'm an idiot. But anyway, the Kung Fu school gave us an amazing deal. It was such good value that more than half the students there had no interest in Kung Fu whatsoever. For a foreigner to meet the conditions of their student visa, they had to be enrolled in a course of full-time education at a registered and recognised school. The traditional way to achieve this was at any one of the dozens of English language schools, many of which had sprung up to cater specifically to visa seekers. Learning English was, after all, why most of these people were here. The only trouble was these English schools knew their market, and they'd been slowly ratcheting up the prices. Now, suddenly, there was a new player in town. The Kung Fu school, wanting to expand their clientele, had registered for visa-granting status, and they were way cheaper than the language schools. And so, Jill and I came to spend most of our afternoons trading punches with a wide variety of Asian students, none of whom knew Kung Fu and none of whom really wanted to. But they couldn't really complain about it to us, as none of them spoke English either. And they could take a good beating, so we all enjoyed ourselves royally. One day, on the long walk home from training, we broached the topic of work. We'll have to find some eventually, I said, or we literally won't be able to afford Christmas. As in, we won't be able to afford to eat. I know, said Jill, but I've been scouring the Gumtree website. There's nothing around. I keep getting emails back saying all the Christmas recruitment was done in September. I hate to say it, but don't say it. We'll manage. We always do, remember? True enough. Imagine this. A year ago, we were in Margaret river, living in a pair of tents, and getting up at 5 a.m. to pick grapes. Bloody hell, I can hardly believe we got here, struggling across the Nullarbor with Rusty boiling up every 10 miles, but we made it. And now, well, we'll do it again. God only knows how, but we always come out on top. You're right. Jill brightened visibly. It's our positive attitude and our belief that everything will work out. That's what makes everything work out. And so long as we keep believing in ourselves, it always will. You know what? We should write a book about this. Something motivational. As bloody if. You've been working in that frigging bear that ate whatever the hell it ate for how long now? 3 years? About that, yeah. I'll be married and have grandkids before we write a book about this. And you know what? As I sit here writing this, I've just come back from visiting a certain someone. I don't want to spoil any of what's to come, so all I'll say is this. I spent an awful lot of time changing nappies while I was there. And I wasn't even wearing one. So while you weren't quite right, Jill, you also weren't entirely wrong either. For the next couple of days, we compromised our incredible lifestyle and headed into Sydney's backpacker district of King's Cross to look for work. The first day was a complete bust. Seeking out notice boards in youth hostels, we crossed and then crisscrossed town, becoming more and more cheesed off with each successive failure. There wasn't anything advertised in the few places that even allowed us to look at the notice boards, and the newspapers we picked up carried only the usual adverts for commission-based telesales positions and hookers. Bored, tired and miserable, we came home to a dinner of leftovers that we'd be eking out for more days than was probably healthy. It'll all work out, I reminded Jill, even though to my own ears it sounded a bit feeble. The next day, however, I had a change of tune. I woke up in a mood so positive I could have drowned a unicorn in it. I tried to explain this to Jill as we packed a bag with stacks of CVs and certificates. You know, I told her, I got one of those feelings. Oh hell, it wasn't the furry sausages, was it? I told you they were too far gone. No, dude, for once I'm not talking about my bowel movements. Oh, she seemed genuinely surprised for a second. Sorry, carry on then. Okay, so I've got this feeling. If you're about to burst into song, I think you should warn me. Jill! Sorry. Right. Well, I've been thinking, this is a sweet gig we've got going on here. It's too good for us to waste. I mean, here we are, penniless backpackers, and we're living in the penthouse, training kung fu 6 days a week just for the hell of it, swimming in our private pool, living life to the max in this incredible apartment. True enough. So what I'm thinking is that maybe we weren't meant to get jobs. Imagine what a pity it would be to live in a place like this and yet have to drag ourselves out of bed every day and go to work in some crappy backpackery type job. That caught your interest. So what do you think we should do? Well, I think we should go out looking for jobs just like we were going to. It's the right thing to do, because we have to at least make an effort. But I also don't think we're going to find any jobs. It doesn't feel right. It's like, I can tell there isn't anything out there for us. Why would there be? And to be honest, would we want there to be? So what do we do? She repeated. We look for jobs, but we won't get them. But something is going to happen to help us out of this situation. I know it. Not jobs, at least I don't think so. Something else is going to happen, and it's going to solve all our problems and leave us free to enjoy ourselves this Christmas. I can feel it. Fair enough, said Jill. I trust you. And she did, which was an amazing thing by itself. After all the dramas I'd put the poor girl through, she still believed in me, even when I came out with something that sounded like I was losing touch with reality. You know what? Honestly, I think she felt it too. But there was no point both of us sounding like lunatics, so she chose to keep quiet. For the second day of our doomed quest, we headed once more to Sydney's backpacker area, and, coincidentally, the red light district. It worries me, over the backpacker part of me, just how often those two things go together. It was a good hour's hike from the apartment, which gave us plenty of chance to chat about what we expected to find. Jill is the only person I know who can convincingly carry on a conversation for over an hour on the topic of nothing. This time we started at the opposite end of the King's Cross strip, hitting up the places we'd been too disillusioned to try the previous day. Our heads were like radar dishes, eyes peeled for flyers on walls and in windows. Flat wanted, flat wanted, flat wanted, read the messages we saw. Predictably, every hostel was rammed solid over the Christmas period. Equally predictably, they were all charging outrageous prices for even the most basic accommodation. The net result of this was a city bursting at the seams with backpackers, all of whom were frantically chasing the slightest glimmer of a job opportunity. And most of them had a double jump on me and Jill. They not only had a head start, but they were living right in the area where any jobs to be found would be found. When Jill and I called it a day and made the long, hungry trek back to Leo's, we had to recognise the facts. There weren't any jobs, and if there were, we would not be the ones to get them. And if we were perfectly honest, we really didn't want to be. The kind of crappy employment prospects the other backpackers were fighting over would risk seriously cramping our style. And anyway, I told Jill as we headed for home. Something will happen. Don't worry, I just know it. That evening, taking advantage of Leo's breathtakingly fast broadband connection, I checked my email. There was a message sitting there from Leo himself, which was as expected. Our second rent check was now due. I turned the screen towards Jill and asked her if she'd like to help me write the reply. If nothing else, I figured I could beg Leo to keep the bond we'd paid him, use that to cover the rent we owed, and promise him that if anything was damaged when he got back, we'd sort it out with him. I didn't plan on breaking anything worth $600, but in a place like this it was hard to tell. I'd broken 3 or 4 things already, and just by being me, and any one of them could have turned out to be valuable. Rich people almost never fill their apartments with cheap crap for me to break. Jill sat next to me on the bed and took a deep breath, sighed it out, and clicked on Leo's email. Hi Tony and Jill, it said. Thank you so much for paying the second instalment of your rent. The money went into my account this morning, so we're all good. Please find attached your receipt for $600. I hope you both have a great Christmas, and I'll see you when I get back. All the best, Leo. We stared at the message in silence for long enough for galaxies to be formed. But we didn't, she said finally. Is that what you expected? I don't know. I guess, I said. And to this day, neither of us has any clue as to how that happened. Miscounting of funds? By a mathematician and a geneticist? Bank error in our favour? What are the odds of that? Trust to fate, I told myself. And I've told myself the same thing ever since that day. Ever since. It always works out. Trust to fate. One more or are we done?
It's nearly 10 to, so it's up to you. Which one have you got?
Oh, go on, one more. Separation anxiety. I fulfilled a long-held wish that year. I got to have pizza for Christmas dinner. In fact, we had pizza for dinner 3 days either side of Christmas too, as it was on mega cheap special offer at the supermarket. Jill and I had developed a habit. Every evening we'd rock up just before closing time and scour the shelves for all the food that had been reduced for a quick sale. We brandished our discoveries at each other, calling things like, "Dude, cottage cheese for 99 cents!" across the shop. Then cackling madly in triumph, we'd head towards the checkout chicks and watch them sigh as we approached. Every item in our baskets would be heavily discounted, they knew, and that meant most of them wouldn't scan properly. I could actually see them slowing down while serving their next customers in the hope of keeping their queue so long we'd move to the next register over. The walk back from the shop, heavily laden, felt like victory. Up in Leo's flat, we'd assemble and admire our purchases, swapping them around like puzzle pieces until we decided what combinations would make the most interesting meals. Thus was born devilled pasta salad on toast, sausage and meatball kebabs, and medley of special offer soups. Jill has always been somewhat creative when it comes to food, pie and mushy pea sandwiches being a particular favourite of hers. And over years of extended travel, I've developed the ability to eat absolutely anything. To me, a sell-by date 3 weeks past is just a number. Better than that, it's a challenge. This will make you sick if you eat it, some food technician or scientist somewhere has decreed, to which I can't help but reply, wanna bet? And for the record, I'd like to say I was not sick once over Christmas, and the only thing I ate that was within its sell-by date was the pizza, which was rubbish. Plans for a Christmas party had been scaled back repeatedly until one day, walking home tired but satisfied, having pummeled a whole bunch of Asians, Jill went to check her bank balance and discovered it was $10. My own account had been empty since our first payment to Leo. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and the impending horror of Christmas without any kind of alcohol, not to mention food, drove Jill to a sudden act of vandalism. She grabbed Christmas cards from the pile we'd received and started tearing them open. "Come on," she encouraged one, "these ones are from Mum and Dad." And then it dawned on me. My parents, bless them, are from a different generation. Whilst my sister and I feel content to swan around the world expecting it to somehow provide for us, our parents know better. They've worked hard, damn hard, their entire lives, and they've done most of it to support Julian and I. Every year, wherever we are, at birthdays and holidays, they send us a bit of money, and right now, that money is going to be our salvation. Thanks, guys. And parents, if you're reading this, and you are the kind that gives money to your children, on their behalf, I'd like to say thank you. We really appreciate it. Yes, I know ideally we should be working hard to build a stable career, pursuing realistic goals and a sensible relationship, putting in those 9 to 5 hours and working our way up the corporate ladder. Oh, sorry, I fell asleep right in that last sentence. But you'll know that deep down, you really want us to follow our dreams, right? I'm sure I speak for all your offspring when I say donations to the cause are gratefully received. And now we return to our scheduled programming. Oh yes, It was around this time that we got a parking ticket for Rusty. Not because he was in the wrong place, but because we parked him facing the wrong direction. We couldn't believe it, but Rue later confirmed it. In Australia, the law says you have to park facing the opposite appropriate direction of travel. Supposedly, this is because in order to park the other way around, you must have done some illegal manoeuvring on the wrong side of the road. Incredible. Apparently, it's the law in some other places too, but where the hell do they actually enforce that shit? Sydney, that's where. That was one little piece of the bad karma that was balancing out our good fortune, I guess. A much bigger part was the general feeling of loneliness we were experiencing. Jill and I always had a great time hanging out together, but now Christmas Day was upon us yet again. It made us painfully aware that we were alone, adrift in a strange country with all our family and friends literally on the other side of the world. This is one aspect of travel which I've always struggled with, the feeling that somewhere back at home people I care deeply about are living happy, contented lives, and I'm not involved in any way. My usual antidote to this is to find something crazy to do, go off on a trip, or failing that, get heavily drunk. But I had to be responsible now. As the figurative head of our little family unit, I had to look after Jill and make sure she was safe and that she was happy too. And anyway, we couldn't afford vodka. Most of all, I missed Rue. Jill missed her too, of course. The three of us had been together for so long, through so many ridiculous adventures, that we'd bonded to an almost unhealthy degree. But I'm going out on a limb here and saying that I miss Rue more than Jill did. Certainly more different ways than Jill did. Or so I hoped. I also hoped, as she relaxed in Perth with her dad and her sisters, that she missed me too. Rue flying back in was one of the happiest moments of my life up to that point. I wasn't sure if I'd been harbouring lingering doubts about our relationship, specifically about the likelihood of her deciding to remain in Perth with her family, but all that was blown away when she stepped out of the arrivals gate in Sydney Airport. Rusty was delighted to see her too. The old van had hardly turned a wheel in the month since he'd dropped her off at the same airport, and he was on his best behaviour. I think he was worried about being left behind when we headed off on the next leg of our grand adventure to Melbourne. We'd been discussing our next move over Skype and email ever since Christmas, as Rue's return meant we only had a couple of days left in Leo's flat. With no real prospects in Sydney, we decided to try our luck further afield, and Melbourne fit that bill perfectly. That night, Rue moved into the master bedroom, and poor Jill was relocated to the couch. I really did feel sorry for her, but not enough to stop me doing it. This cut right back to the heart of a situation I've been worrying over in the back of my mind ever since it first occurred to me in the middle of the Bibbleman track. Jill and me were great together. Jill and Rue were great together. Rue and me together were more than great, off the charts great in fact, and somehow managing to get greater all the time. Jill and Rue and me, that was fun, and it had been fun, but more and more I was starting to feel that it wasn't healthy, and that it wasn't fair on Jill. I came out to sit with her after Rue went to sleep that night, and we had a glass of wine from a rapidly diminishing box of goon. So, Rue's back, I started. She is, Jill agreed. I feel a bit bad about how this has all worked out for you, I explained. I'm aware I kind of stole her. Yeah, I kind of stole her. No, you actually stole her. She was mine, and now she's yours. That's stealing. Okay, fair point. Thank you. Right, well, I think I've figured out a way to make it up to you. Oh? Yes. I'm kicking you out. Here in Sydney. When me and Rue carry on to Melbourne, we're going to leave you here. What? Are you fucking kidding me? What the hell do you mean staying here? What the hell would I do in Sydney? Well, you said yourself. You don't want to leave Kung Fu. You like it here. Of course I do, but it doesn't mean I want to stay. Not on my own. Ah, I see. Oh well, you haven't got a choice. Rue and I need some time alone, and you need to meet people, to have some fun without us for a change, make some new friends, and maybe even a boyfriend. You need to see what adventures you can get up to when we're not around to cramp your style. I won't write what she said next, not because I'm a stranger to swear words, but because I've never heard quite so many of them overlapping each other. Her tirade continued at some length. I don't know why, but I got the feeling that Jill wasn't too pleased with my decision, so I gave her some space to think it over. I'm sensitive like that. And we'll leave it there, guys, for now.
Except that she considers it was her idea now, doesn't she?
Yeah, that was interesting. After
a while.
After some drinks recently visiting Jill, we were chatting about it, and she's convinced that it was her idea to leave, which is fantastic. I don't want to disabuse her of that notion because it certainly gets me off the hook. But no, I literally kicked her out there.
Yeah, so
I convinced myself it was for her own good.
Half of the car. She did.
It's a good point, actually.
We did pay her.
Did we?
Yeah, we paid her some money.
Oh, there we go then. So much better. Yeah.
Oh, poor Joe.
Ah dear, poor girl. But strange things happen, and that led indirectly to sort of exactly where her life led her. So, for better or for worse. But who knows? I mean, if she'd stayed with us in Melbourne, anything could have happened.
Yeah.
But we were always living in the same places and getting the same jobs together, and basically just living and working, doing everything together. And yeah, it would have been a bit of a cramp for me and Rue in the sort of early stages of our relationship and stuff. But just really was a cramp for Jill, because none of us had any friends, because we didn't make friends as we travelled, because we were a threesome, we were a unit, so we didn't need to go out of our way looking for friends. And to a degree, me and Rue are still like that. Really, we're ridiculously attached to each other, and
we like
as a consequence, we don't go out a lot, and we don't have any friends. And when we travel really around the world, we go and we stay in places and we explore together and we do activities together and we meet the occasional people, but that's it. We don't just sort of bond in the same way as you do if you're a single traveller out there desperately lonely and looking to meet people. And Jill, on the other end of the scale, has a huge amount of friends, mostly through having her kids and that, and she's got that in spades. But anyway,
it's good. It was a good day.
I will leave it there for now, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you really enjoyed it. That was it was a bit of a long one. I will, as I say, next week I will do the end of Kamikaze Kangaroos. I'll talk about New Zealand, or read about New Zealand, and the very, very end when I propose to Rue. So we'll get over that bit, and from then on, it'll be Can I Kiss You Yet? But
exciting.
That's a ways off yet. So thank you very much, guys. I'll say goodbye now. I'm starting to go hoarse. So I shall press my little magic finish button, and once again, look after yourselves and stay safe. Till next week.